being asked is, have you put up all your Christmas decorations? Have you finished your Christmas shopping? Or have you mailed all your Christmas cards? Have you put on your calendar all the places that you're supposed to go? Are you ready for Christmas? We see ourselves coming and going, and so we call it the Christmas rush. And sometimes the Christmas season becomes very hectic, and because of that, we tend to forget much of the reason for the season. There is a rather popular Christmas story about a little girl who watched her mother and dad get ready for Christmas. To her, it seemed that her dad was preoccupied with the burdens and bundles, while her mom was concerned about the presents and parties. And it seemed to her that they just didn't have time for her. She felt that she was being shoved aside, and in fact, it seemed to her that she was always being told, "Will you please just get out of the way?" So one night in December, she knelt beside her bed and prayed this prayer: "Our Father, who art in heaven, please forgive us our Christmases as we forgive those who Christmas against us." You see, when I ask the question, "Are you ready for Christmas?" I am asking much more than just your activities. I'm asking about your attitudes. Because every once in a while you may hear someone say, "I just can't get into the Christmas spirit." And maybe even you have said it yourself. But with that in mind, let's think once again about what Christmas really means. Christmas says that God became a human being. God expressed his love by living amongst us, by walking with us and talking to us. That is what Christmas means. But what are the right attitudes we ought to have so that Christmas can really happen in our homes and in our lives? So for a few minutes this morning, let's turn our attention to the Christmas story as recorded in Matthew 1:18 through 25. Please listen as I read and follow along, if you will. This is how the birth of Jesus came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be with child through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was a righteous man and did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had a mind to divorce her quietly. But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." All of this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet, "The virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel," which means God's with us. When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him to do, and took Mary home as his wife. But he had no union with her until she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Jesus. Every year we talk about Jesus and his birth, and for good reason. That is the reason why we are celebrating. We also talk about Mary and the 3 wise men. We even talk about the shepherds. But you know who we do not talk about very much during Christmas, or any other time for that matter? Mary's husband, Joseph. I like Joseph. He didn't stand in the spotlight for very long, and we don't know a whole lot about his life. But Joseph can teach us a lot about attitudes, the attitudes that can make Christmas real in our lives too. First of all, Joseph teaches us to be ready to accept God's will, whatever it might be. Joseph was open to the will and leading of God. Let's put ourselves in his shoes. Joseph thought his life was pretty well planned. He was pledged to be married, which means he and Mary had made all the necessary arrangements, and the wedding ceremony was soon to take place. Joseph knew that he would marry Mary, that they would settle down in Nazareth, he would continue on it with his carpentry career, and they would live happily ever after together. But Mary then came to him and said, "Joseph, I'm expecting a child." It must have hit him like a bombshell. He thought that Mary had loved him as much as he had loved her, but now seemingly she had been unfaithful to him. He knew the child was not his, and so his only conclusion could be that she had been unfaithful. She had broken the bond that had existed between them. According to the law, Mary should have been stoned to death. But Joseph loved her so much that he didn't want to see that, so he decided that he was going to divorce her quietly. As he was thinking about this, an angel came to Joseph, and in a dream in effect said to him, "Joseph, trust God. He is in this. You may not understand what is happening, but just trust God and everything will be all right." Joseph evidently was a man of faith, because sometimes it is hard to live by faith. If God always did what we expected him to do, living by faith would be pretty easy. But when God doesn't do what we expect him to, living by that same faith is a lot harder. Joseph, however, did trust God, even though he may have had a list a mile long of questions to ask. He trusted God because he believed that God's will was best. We find ourselves in much the same position as Joseph. Christmas comes at a time of peace, but there is also conflict. Christmas comes as a time of joy, but there's also much sadness. Christmas comes in a time of love, but there is also much hatred in our world. We cry out like Joseph must have cried out, "God, how can this be?" But like Joseph, we hear a small voice from God saying, "Trust me." God's ways may not always be our ways, and usually are not. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and we may never understand anything that God is doing this side of heaven. But God says, "Trust me," and it will all work out. Paul wrote in Romans 8:28, "We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, and have been called according to his purpose." Christmas happened because Joseph trusted God, and we need to learn to trust God too. The second thing that Joseph can teach us is that we need to learn to care for other people. You know that Joseph's assignment was a pretty simple one, and that is that's how we often portray him in our Christmas plays. We picture Mary looking so angelic. Over here are the excited shepherds, and over there are the wise men with their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. In the middle is Christ's child in the manger, looking pure and clean. Over to one side stands Joseph. He isn't in a starring role, but his part is so important. His task is this: take care of Mary and the baby Jesus. Joseph had the important role of caring for the needs of others. Christmas comes once a year, and this season probably causes us to be more sensitive to the needs of others. But there is so much that needs to be done that we often find ourselves frustrated. But we still try. Maybe the finest descriptive title that can be given to a church is this: a church that really cares. There is a story about a young couple with an 18-month-old son who had gone to spend a few days with the grandparents for Christmas. Christmas Day fell on a Sunday that year, and the young father had to be back to work on Monday the next morning. So right after going to church together, the young family said their goodbyes to their parents and set off for home. There wasn't very many gas stations open because it was Christmas, but eventually they did find a truck stop that was open. So they stopped to get some fuel and something to eat. They went inside the dimly lit restaurant and sat down and found that they were the only customers there, or so they thought. But then their little son Eric, 18 months old, started saying, "Hi there, hi there." He was putting two words together, hi and there, and made them into his own word, hi there. And every time he said that, there was a response from a table in the alcove near the door. "Hi there, little buddy." They looked over the alcove and they saw an old, ragged, tattered-looking man. His coat was several sizes too big. He was wearing trousers that drug to the floor and shoes that had holes in them that you could see his toes through. When he smiled, you could tell that he had no teeth. He was unshaven, and yet, for some reason, little Eric's attention was drawn to this old man, and he kept saying, hi there, every time the old man would answer. Finally, the man said, do you know how to play patty cake? And sure enough, from across the room, little Eric started playing patty cake. Do you know how to play peekaboo? And sure enough, little Eric hid his eyes and started playing peekaboo. There was an instant rapport between little Eric and this old man, who was obviously a reject from society. Eric's parents felt uneasy. The husband whispered to his wife, let's eat our food and get out of here as quickly as possible. So they gulped it down and they said, I'll pay for the food, you get Eric out the door. She started towards the door, hoping to get out without any problems, but just as they passed, Eric reached both of his arms out towards the old man. The old man sat there looking up at the mother and then asked, would you mind if I held your baby? Really, she didn't have much to say, because at this time Eric had virtually lunged out of her arms at the old man. He cradled Eric in one of his hands and patted his back with the other, as Eric put his arms around the man's neck and gave him a hug. Closing his eyes, the man just talked to him, and tears started streaming down his cheeks. For a long moment, he held that child and loved it. And as he did, he looked at the mother and said, you take good care of this baby. She answered him, I will, sir. He then handed Eric back to her and said, thank you. Thank you very much. You have given me the greatest Christmas present I could have asked for. Christmas came because Joseph cared about Mary and Jesus. It will also come for us when we learn to care about others too. Thirdly, Christmas came to Joseph because Joseph gave. He gave whatever he had to give. He didn't know that after Jesus was born, he would have to take Mary and the baby to Egypt. He didn't know that he would be separated from his hometown and his loved ones there for a long period of time. He didn't know all the demands that would be made on his time and his pocketbook. But whatever God asked of him, Joseph freely gave. That is what Christmas is about, isn't it? When God gave himself, Christmas happened. When Joseph gave himself, Christmas happened. There is nothing wrong with giving gifts during this Christmas time, but the greatest gift that one can give is love. There was a 7th grade student named Wally who was bigger than any of the other students in his Sunday school class. His mother had been having problems during the pregnancy, and as a result, Wally did not have all the mental capabilities that the rest of his classmates had, but somehow he managed to get by. Christmas time came, and his class decided they were going to put on a Christmas pageant. Since he was the biggest, Wally was selected to be the innkeeper. After all, the innkeeper is a sort of villain in our Christmas story. So they coached Wally to be just as mean as he possibly could. And when that night came for the Christmas play, Mary and Joseph came to Bethlehem. They went to the inn and knocked on the door and asked, we need a room, we need a place to stay. Well, you'll have to stay somewhere else, Wally said, because there's no room here, there's no room in the inn. Joseph said, but my wife is expecting a baby any time now. Isn't there some place we could stay? Anywhere where we could be protected from the cold, where she could deliver her child. No, said Wally, there's no room here. Suddenly there was silence on stage. It was one of those embarrassing moments when you realize that someone had forgotten their lines. From behind the curtains you could hear the prompter saying, be gone, be gone. Wally was supposed to speak, but for some reason he had choked up and forgotten his final word, be gone. Finally, after he had been coached for several seconds, he finally mustered up to say, "Begone," and Mary and Joseph sadly turned to leave. But just as they did, Wally spoke up again, saying, wait a minute, you can have my room." The director of the play was ready to pull out her hair. She knew that the entire Christmas pageant had been ruined. But had it? Maybe Wally, better than anybody else, had communicated the real spirit of Christmas. You can have my room. You can have my life. That is what God said at Christmas time. You can have me. I give myself. That is the greatest gift of all. So I ask you again, are you ready for Christmas? I don't know if you'll be able to get all your shopping done or not. I don't know if you'll be able to attend all the events that you want to attend. But I hope that you are ready in attitude. I hope that you are ready for the real spirit of Christmas to come. Because if you're ready, then it'll happen. It'll happen in the greatest way possible. Jesus Christ stands before us today, inviting us to make an important decision about our lives and eternity. He extends his nail-pierced hands and says, I have given my life for you. I have given my all for you. Will you give your all to me? If you've made a decision that needs to be made publicly this morning, I pray that you will make that decision as we stand together and sing. Amen.
Let's stand and sing Just As I Am. Just as I am, without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and thou bidst me come to thee, O Lamb of God, I come, I come. Just as I am,